Hi, and welcome to the Sustainable Region. I'm Vanessa Timmer. Our year-long coverage of the GVRD Sustainability Dialogues continues with ideas about culture. Today, our participants will discuss the role of culture in building a livable and sustainable region. They ask, how do we facilitate that?
The idea today is to examine the role in building a sustainable and livable region and what should be done to facilitate that. Of course, there are, as we now say so often, issues. What is not an issue is whether or not Greater Vancouver wants to become a culturally diverse region. So the real question is, how do we remain a civil society and build on that sense of community? And how do we profit from it? We're very fortunate today to have four very outstanding citizens as our panel. Andrew Wilhelm Boyles is Executive Director, Alliance for Arts and Culture. Gary Crystal is Gary Crystal Art Management. David Lemon, Executive Director, the Health Arts Society. And Chris Kelly, who is the Superintendent of Schools, School District 39, which is Vancouver. So ladies and gentlemen, we'll get it started right now. Andrew Wilhelm Boyles. Andrew?
Thank you. First, let's define culture. When we discuss it today, we will discuss it in two basic definitions. One is what we call the UNESCO definition, which is the set of distinctive spiritual, material, intellectual, and emotional features of a society or a social group that encompasses, in addition to art and literature, lifestyles, ways of living together, value systems, traditions, and beliefs. So that's culture writ large. Then we also define culture as the visual, literary, and performing arts and associated arts. If we ignore the first, we are dismissing what motivates people, what gives identity and meaning to their lives, and what connects us as human beings. We dare not ignore the first. If we ignore the second, we are forfeiting the most powerful instruments of communication, imagination, inspiration, and creativity known to humankind. We dare not ignore the second either. I believe there are cultural solutions, and that until we start addressing cultural issues, until we allow culture to underpin everything we do and govern every aspect of our lives, or at least infect every aspect of our lives, we're not going to dig ourselves out of the hole in which we find ourselves.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Next is Gary Crystal.
The great thing about art is that artists will create it in whatever environment they are in. And so that means that even though, in my view, the GVRD has been guilty of criminal neglect of its artists continue to produce. Thank heavens. Art is not created by organizations, it's not created by funders, it's not created by arts-friendly businesses, it is created by artists. And I think we need to look at how we support artists and develop a strategy for artists. Artists need two things, really. They need support in various forms, monetary and non-monetary, and they need audiences. And I think it's a responsibility of government to look at culture the same way they look at sewers, lights, and say, let's include the arts as something that is absolutely necessary and should be supported. And in that case, what do the artists need? How can we provide audiences? How can we provide funding? In Toronto, the Toronto Arts Council actually does something heretical. They will give money to an individual artist with a good idea. So an artist in Ontario who lives in Toronto can get money at the federal level from the Canada Council, can get money from the province through the Ontario Arts Council, and get money from the Toronto Arts Council, all for the same project, and do something great. An artist living out here has access to the Canada Council. So they're in a federal competition. The provincial government doesn't support them in that way for those kinds of projects, and neither do any of the municipalities, as far as I know. And if I'm wrong, then that needs to be generalized as well. And that's part of developing a regional cultural strategy. It's not only looking at best practices across the country, but looking at best practices in the GVRD. Years ago, I was on a Mayor's Arts Committee with David Lemon. I suggested we just put toll booth on the bridge. And it's 7 o'clock at night. Oh, you're coming into town. That's terrific. Going to see a show, going to enjoy one of the other cultural pursuits of Vancouver. That'll be a toonie. Everybody thought it was a crazy idea, but I think at least it would have generated millions of dollars towards culture and the arts in the region. I think we need to make sure that the decisions, that the conversation is more inclusive than 5 old white guys sitting at the front of a table. I think we need to make sure that these kinds of discussions, and not just the people who get invited, but the people who are speaking, represent the people who live here, the cultural practices, and culture generally.
Thank you very much, Gary. And now David Lemon, Executive Director of the Health Arts Society. David?
Thank you, Ralph. The thing about this session, it seems to me, is what can the GVRD do for art and artists, and what can it do for its member municipalities and cities? We gather from the documents that I think you've all got that a huge amount is being spent on culture now. Maybe people are actually getting the arts life they want around the province, around this region. But I think this GVRD project is clearly one about ensuring diversity where it will not be self-supporting. Artists create work in our society not because it serves any utilitarian objective, but because they have to create work. It's an expression of their imagination. Arguments for support of artists and subsidy of audiences on grounds of social harmony, social cohesion, and economic vitality haven't actually yet succeeded in generating sustained support by governments. And as an old white person standing up here, I've been talking about this with some of these folk for 30 years, and it hasn't changed. So what possibly could the GVRD do for each of its members? So here's a thought. It could create an arts advisory and development office to help people build resources in their own municipal communities. Arts projects will be particular to the interests and values of citizens and create a rich diversity of arts life that might actually encourage movement of audiences around the region. The office could work with the municipal and city governments to promote sharing of arts ideas and projects. It can inventory and promote imaginative uses of municipal and private resources that might not have been considered useful for arts projects. The office can also bring expertise to arts project organizers to help them build new funding streams in the private sector. The office could be funded by all municipalities and cities. The last figures I have for the region, the municipal spending, is something like from 1995, about $2 million, of which 1.4 came from 20 of the 21 regions. This is such a small amount of money. It isn't growing that fast, and we're not going to be able to put great big plans together, but we can see each municipality building its own project with the overarching support of a GVRD organization. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Now our cleanup hitter, Chris Kelly, Superintendent of Schools, Vancouver School Board. Chris?
First of all, I want to say, non-rhetorically, what an honor it is to be included in this. I want to recognize that art is, in fact, a means and a medium. It is the means and the medium, I believe, for the creation and development of culture. And culture has no sort of predetermined sense of what it is. It's a possibility that is constantly emerging. And therefore, art becomes essential to learning, because learning is a constantly emerging act, just as a human life is a constantly blossoming, becoming thing. There's nothing static about this. And my premise for the little bit of time that I have is that if you buy any of that, the fact is that engagement of a person at any age, in any circumstance, with and by art, is essential to that person's learning and development. It's non-optional. Therefore, that essential to a person's learning and development becomes essential to a society's learning and development. It's non-optional to a society's learning and development. And therefore, it becomes non-optional and essential to a society's active, conscientious creation of culture, without any predetermined sense of what that might be, but from the standpoint of what is essential to a human life and a social life. So I got three aspects on this. There's a philosophical, and there's a practical, and there's a propositional. The philosophical was handed to me, thankfully, by a local artist by the name of Ranjan when I just happened to be in his basement looking at his work 30 years ago when I was embarking on a career in education. And he said simply and profoundly to me, understand one thing, art civilizes society. The point is this, there's nothing to be predetermined about a sense that a person is going to make of their surroundings. That's the beautiful possibility of the human life. But when you collect learning with the medium of art, just watch what happens, which moves me now into the practical. With all of its shortcomings and limitations, some of them already mentioned by Gary, you bring any fraction of artistic into the environment for learning around the phenomenal possibilities of the meaning that a young person will make out of that, and it's almost indescribable what happens. The artist residence program that we have, the involvement of things like the Sculpture Biennale, the operas in schools, everything that is brought to the schools has this phenomenal outcome in terms of the meaning that people will make with it. So here's my proposition. If we were to conceive, as we are working to within this city, and there are people in the room that can attest to this, to the city of Vancouver as a city of learning, that conscientiously seeks to engage the best of what it can do artistically and culturally for the sake of the possibility of the quality of human lives collectively and individually, we can't lose.
Thank you very much, Chris. Now is the time for questions from the floor. Yes, sir.
What's the problem that we're all talking about here? The GVRD, as far as I'm concerned, has never been responsible for culture. Individual municipalities promote this, but what is the issue? And as a rider to that question, where else can we learn how a city has coped with this? But heck, we're just a little over 120 years old. We're on a high learning curve.
You know, it is yes, it's only 100 years old, sort of, as what it is now. But I'll be frank with you, in many societies around the world that I've been to, it is the ones that are the newest and who have found had access to technology most recently who are able to move leaps and bounds ahead of older places. It's no excuse that Vancouver as a city goes back to 1886 or whatever it is, or New West a little earlier. The point of the exercise is to act now in the interests of creating the best kind of cultural environment that we can create.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi there. My name is Nina Winham. I'm with Junction Strategy, and we work in sustainability engagement and communications. And I would like to invite the panel to think about how we link this discussion about arts and culture to the mandate of the series, which is sustainability. And I'll offer one small idea about what can be done on our topic, which is how do we use the role of culture in building a sustainable region and what should be done. And it would be the humble block party. That type of thing where perhaps you send some skilled facilitators, who could be artists, out to the block parties, and maybe you actually do something that more proactively promotes the block party as one of the ways that people come together. But you get people out of their houses, you get them in the street, you get them in an experience of trust and collaboration, you get them to do those fun, humble things that used to be done at local festivals, and you give them an experience of what it means to live together in community. Because it seems to me that that's the challenge.
Andrew?
Brilliant. Thank you. Ultimately, I believe it is all about building community. That's all there is. That is the only thing that's going to stand between us and disaster, ultimately, is the ability to build community.
Chris?
If you're going to have a culture of learning, our cultural sustainability, it's going to be founded upon an active culture of learning. And therefore, you have a culture of learning for sustainability. And that is a dynamic culture of learning for sustainability. And that's quite different from what we have had by way of our typical culture of education, by the way. Like, we're at a very different threshold with this. Because here's the key principle within this culture of learning that's vastly different from the education system as I've known it and people popularly know it. It is the total belief in the full capacity of a young person, in the fullness of his or her 5 years of life, or 10 years of life, to determine what sustainability will be in terms of the way they live their life in relationship to others. And we obviously don't have the answer on that, or we wouldn't be sitting here.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Nola Kate Seymour with the International Center for Sustainable Cities. One question is, how many people in the room are professional artists? So a very small minority. How many of us are not professional but amateur artists? That's a much greater number. I grew up in Edmonton, and one of the characteristics about Edmonton during that time was neighborhood community leagues where everybody took arts and crafts, drama, hockey, skating, all of the essential things happened within the community. So I'm very struck by the need to go back to the roots of building that engagement in both senses of culture into our neighborhoods.
Yes. Carry on, David.
I'm so glad you asked that question. When people put their hands up, including myself, for who is an amateur artist, really everybody who's expressing themselves in some way is an artist. Now, sure, there are going to be all sorts of questions about where do they fit in the scheme of things. I mean, but that's a very hard thing for anyone to tell. I looked at a Canada Council application once, and it said, "Where are you in your career?" And I thought, how would anybody know who is an artist, where they are in their career, unless they've just been able to say, well, we've sold this and we've sold that, which brings the whole thing back to money and utility, which is not what the arts are all about.
Okay. Andrew, you had a comment?
Nobody expects arts to solve all the problems of the world, but the fact is that engagement in arts tends to increase creative thought and innovation and all of those things that we need to combine with all other resources to find solutions to the problems. And that's my concern. I don't see us doing that enough. I don't see that kind of creative thought infecting enough of our pursuits.
Yes, sir.
My name is Rob Matthews. I'm with the Solar Power Roadshow. What kind of activities, in light of we're living on borrowed time, in light of that, what would you like us to do?
In Winnipeg, a core area school partnered with the Royal Winnipeg Ballet to bring dance, not ballet, but hip-hop and jazz, to a bunch of kids who were kids at risk. They were big guys who could no longer see the value in their education. They were in trouble with the law, and those kids are now teaching other kids in other core area schools of Winnipeg how to self-actualize, to use that horrible expression, through dance and through the arts. It works, but we've got to make it real, and there's got to be the political will, there's got to be the social will to make it happen, project by project, community by community, and it works.
I think we're getting into some interesting areas. I do not believe that art can solve the problems of society. I also believe that art is not a Band-Aid to be used walking around the battlefields of the war, patching people up. I do think that art can articulate issues that are being debated, that are under discussion in human society, and can mobilize people and motivate people to move forward in ways that can accomplish goals, either for good or for ill. What I want artists to do, in the broadest sense, is reaffirm all that is best in the human experience and motivate people to try to accomplish goals that will make the world a better place, nothing more or less.
Yeah, okay.
Hello, my name is Norman Armour. I'm the Executive Director of the PUSH International Performing Arts Festival. With respect to sustainability, I think it's really important that artists be in situations of forums like this to speak. I'm as guilty as anybody else. I go to networking events, market things, conferences, and rarely are artists actually talking. Rarely are artists speaking about what they need. I do believe that in the end, without money, it's all a moot point. It's a redundant conversation, and it has no value at all, or no ultimate impact in the professional arts community, at least, if money is not tied to it. It's as simple as that. These are professional artists who make a living, who require money to make their art. So if the GVRD wants to be a leader in the discussion of not only culture, but specifically in the area of arts, then it has to be a leader. And to be a leader, you have to put money on the table.
Okay, who would like to pick up on that one?
I think artists obviously want money like any worker. They want to be paid for their work, but they would rather have money to perform in public than, or show their work in public in some way, than simply be given money and say, here, shut up, go create. Here's $5K. I think that in terms of bringing it back to what the GVRD should be doing, I think the more promotion, the more presentation of artists in public spaces supported by public funding for audiences in the most diverse regions of the region, I think is definitely the central item on the agenda for me, and I think certainly the artists who live here that I work with.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Sarah Baker here from the Bowen Island Arts Council. Something that we've done on Bowen Island is through the Arts Council, we developed a cultural master plan for our community. And it works very well for us. Part of that cultural master plan talks about housing artists. And so as a result of that, we have also formed affordable housing association on the island, particularly to address the housing needs of our artists, because we are the 4th community named in the Hills Strategy by per capita, most creative community in Canada.
Okay, let's, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you. The fact is that most artists are not well paid, are not paid well enough. Those of us who work in cultural organizations cannot and who know the value of paying our people properly usually cannot afford to do it. We would not tolerate the level of pay in any other aspect of our society, any other profession that we tolerate in the arts. It's as simple as that. And that, yes, that is, I've been arguing against making it all about money, but certainly money is a key element. It's a scandal. We are asking artists to live, many of them, in poverty conditions, and it's not acceptable.
Hi, I'm Donna Spencer. I'm with the Fire Hall Arts Center, and I am a professional theater director, so I'm one of the few professional artists here as well. My question would be, why has the GVRD failed to recognize the value of arts and culture? And why can't the GVRD become more proactive in supporting arts and culture?
All right, I'd like to move that into the question I haven't yet heard, and I think that's really what the lady is saying. What about the political will? It's very easy to hit the GVRD or my mayor or Lions Bay or whatever with the suggestions we have here, but if there's not the political will amongst the people that elect the elected officials, how do you propose to get more money to the arts?
I very much doubt that the GVRD will come up with a substantial sum of money that could be used to sustain significant theatre companies and ballet companies and music projects across the region. I simply don't think that's going to happen. My feeling is that the GVRD has an opportunity, however, to help the municipalities, the people in the municipalities, leverage their projects through the core communities. If a core community is interested in doing a project of theatre or dance or music, and it gets some assistance from the GVRD to actually mobilize the project, not necessarily invest substantially in it, but provide certain resources to help that organization get off the ground, then the local community will begin to invest. When the local community begins to invest, then they can go to the municipal office and to the council and say, we have raised $150,000, we need $250, and here's our program. It's much more likely it's going to happen that way than the GVRD, the 21 members of the GVRD finding several $1 million when they now have 100,000 this year. It's not going to happen.
Hello, my name is Bernadine Fox, and I'm here as a representative of CARFAC, which is the Canadian Artists Representation. And CARFAC, for those of you who don't know, is fought for and is the only reason why visual artists get paid an exhibition fee for exhibiting their work. It's all fine to talk about funding, but there's a very big difference as an artist being funded for your work and having somebody buy your work. And one of the big things that we know in Vancouver is that it's very hard to sell your work in Vancouver. So I would like to ask the panel if they have any great ideas about how to change that.
Okay, who wants to start with that one?
Well,
Gary.
it's really simple. Art should be bought for display in public spaces in the same way that performing art should be subsidized or hired to perform in public spaces.
Chris?
I just stumbled across a brilliant innovation in this city. I don't know how many people are aware of it. It's called the Vancouver Sculpture Biennale. Are you aware of that? It took place here. 24 installations across the city of astounding works of art. And what the concept was to attract world-class sculptors and artists to come to Vancouver to provide their best as installations that we had the benefit of for 18 months in this city, and they were for sale. And it culminated in them going up for auction. A good number of them were sold, so it allowed the society to carry on. And so there's another Biennale coming our way in a few months. And to me, that's a pretty decent, smart, creative combination of, you know, sustenance as well as evidence of art.
Andrew, last word to you.
There's a responsibility at both ends of the political spectrum. One is at the level of the voters who need to have a better understanding, I think, of the value of art. And that happens primarily through the school system. So the school system, I believe we need a revolution in the school system. That's one thing. I believe that the people have got to lead the politicians to some kind of enlightenment. And we've got to look for some champions at the highest levels of our governments. And we're looking for vision. And I'm not sure how we do that, except by changing governments from time to time.
Unfortunately, we have run out of time for the questions and answers. I want to thank Chris Kelly, David Lemon, Gary Crystal, and Andrew Wilhelm Boyles for being with us today. A heck of a job, guys.
Call us at 604-436-6794 or email us at sustainableregion@metrovancouver.org.